Welcome to Chapter 6. This is in the textbook starting on page 182. And for those of you who may not have the textbook, it's okay. I'm going to be doing this chapter in a notebook so you can follow along with me. I am using graph paper in my notebook because I know that I will be graphing and drawing a lot of graphs, and I really would rather not have to cut and paste all those. So if you have graph paper that you can use, I think that will be very beneficial to you. I want to start off by defining function. And if you want to stop this video and write this definition down, the whole chapter 6 is devoted to functions. So it's really important that we define this word and know what it is we're discussing. A function is a rule that assigns exactly one output to each input. And to help explain this a little bit better, let's draw a table of values, at least the format of the table of values. So I'm going to put a table together, and I want to have, I believe it's 5 rows. So I may have too much. If so, I'll just erase it here in a minute. Let's start with 5. I believe that's what I need, but I'll know as I work through it. So you have seen these before if you did chapter 5 with me. We've talked a lot about X's and Y's. We've talked about inputs and outputs a little bit, not a lot. We've talked about independent and dependent variables. We are going to learn 2 new ways in this chapter to label these columns. The first one is that the X line or the X column is called the domain. The Y column is called the range. Right? And then we also can use X and F of X. So let's just write these down and then I'll help you understand them. I do not need this part of my graph, so let's take that off. So if you're talking about the left side of this table, you can call it any of these terms. All of these labels refer to the data in this column. So if I say the X value, the input, the independent variable, the domain, or just X, we're always talking about those variables. And the same is true for Y. If I say output, dependent variable, range, F of X, all of those refer to the data on this side of the table. So that's one thing we're going to have to adjust to in this chapter, is that we have the range and domain, and then we have X and F of X to think about here. The next thing I want to show you is function notation. And let me just write that out for you, because a professor may ask you to write something in function or using function notation. So what he's talking about is this form, where you have F of X equals, we'll say X, some output over there. So this is the input, and this is the output. And you may be thinking, but you said that output goes with Y. And that is true. That's why F of X and Y are interchangeable. Whatever you get on this side of your equation is the value of Y. So the input is going to be the domain, or a value from the domain. the output is going to be the range. So we'll be working with all these terms interchangeably, and that's going to take some time for you to get the hang of that. So don't be discouraged if it doesn't make perfect sense right now. Just bear with me. It will get better the more you practice. Remember, this is a brick wall, and we're on the first layer of bricks here. We have a lot of bricks to put in before this is a wall. So don't panic, right? Okay, the next thing we want to take a look at is how a table of values and a function relate to each other. So I want you to draw a table of values with 5 rows. So let's bring a line this way, go down 5. You're just basically building a rectangle, and then cut that rectangle in half, put in the column here, and we're going to just use x in this one and f of x in this one. Now remember, I should have put in another column, but it's okay. This is the domain, the input values, and this is the range, the output values. So we have a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and then a 2, a 4, a 6, and an 8. Now, if I put y in there instead of f of x, we probably would be a lot more comfortable because we're used to seeing a y in there. But if we think about it, we've worked with this same type of data. We found the slope. Remember finding the slope? In fact, let's do that. Let's just tie it to what we already know. So I'm going to take 2 points and the slope formula. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you need to stop this video and go back to chapter 5. But if you know what I'm talking about, let's go ahead and do that kind of math. So we're going to do slope, which is m equals, remember this deal from chapter 5? And we put in our equal signs, and then we filled in the values, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And we said, okay, 4 minus 2 is 2, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So slope is 2 over 1, which is equivalent to 2. So we could set up an equation for this scenario using that slope formula. We could say that the output is equal to the slope times the input. So we know the output is y, we know that slope is 2, and we know that the input is x. So this is an equation that we would have written in chapter 5. In chapter 6, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're just using a function notation instead of a y. So the function for this table is here. And here's the proof. Let me show you how this fits together. So function of x is 2x. Now, I'm going to go with a value that I haven't used so far. I'm going to use this 4. Let's look at this term right here. I'm going to input a 4 and see what we get. So when x is 4, the output would be, I'm ahead of myself, sorry. Put the 4 in for the x. The output would be 8. When x is 4, the output is 8. And that's where that point is coming from, 4, 8. So we're relating this to something that we've already done in Chapter 5, but we're using different labels for it. This thing right here is called the function. This is the function that goes with this table of values. Okay. I know that's tough to process. There's a lot there. If you need to pause the video, that's fine. If you're not comfortable with this, you can check with your instructor and he or she can help you understand it better. That is the disadvantage of a distance ed class, because I can't see your faces. You cannot ask me questions. There's not that interaction that is so important. All right, I'm on page 185. And now we're going to start identifying functions. So we're going to be given some information and we have to decide if it is a function. So if you have the textbook, you can look at page 185. For those of you who don't, I want you to draw this table. Let me put one more on there. And we need it to be 5. Let's make it 6 tall, because I'm going to add a piece. So you're just drawing this table with me. And let's draw a line down the middle. And let's put some rows in here. A couple of them. So this is the domain. Which is the x side. And the range is f of x, the output. And we have -1, we have 0, we have 1 and 2, and we have 4, 0, 4, and 8. Now, let's go back to the definition of a function. In fact, it is so important that I'm going to bring it right down here. A function is a rule that assigns exactly one output to each input. So, this is true. We have, in other words, here's the output for -1. Here's the output for 0. Here's the output for for +1, and here's the output for 2. So each of these has only one output for each input. So this is a function. Okay, let's put in another table just like that one. This will be for part B. So build yourself another one from a table of values. And we want to put in the domain, which is the x side, and the range, which is the y side. And we have x, and because we're in chapter 6, instead of a y, we're going to use f of x. And here are the values: 0, 1, 4, and 4. 0, 1, 2, negative, and then 2. So let's test here. We have 0 matched to 0. We have 1 match to 1. And then we have a serious problem because 4 is in here twice. It's the same number, but it matches to -2 and also +2. So this is a violation of the rule. The rule says that you can have exactly 1 output for each input. But here I have an input that has 2 different outputs. So this one is not a function. So here's what you want to remember. Let's sum this up. To test a table of values as a function. In a table of values, the function rule is broken. Let's not say broken, let's say violated. The function rule is violated if the same number appears in the input domain, and let's just leave it at that. So you see that 4 is in there twice in the domain, so the function rule is violated. If you look back at the first example, all of the x's are different. So in a function, all of the x values must be different. You can't duplicate the x's. You can duplicate the y's. Like in the first example, we had the 4 in the output column twice. That's okay. You just can't have it in the input column twice. Okay. I'm going to stop this video because it's getting long, and then we'll pick up right where we're leaving off.